Jennifer, it's been too long. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Good. Can we kick it off with a hug?
Yes.
Let's do that. How you doing?
Great.
Good, good.
Great to see you.
So you too. So tell me what you've been up to since our last podcast. How long has it been? Maybe
A year?
with the knowledge you dropped, that is too long. So what have you been up to?
Doing all kinds of cool stuff. So still working at Mayo in the pre-op clinic, and I do health coaching. It's my side hustle.
I like it.
And yeah, working on some other projects to get the word out about lifestyle medicine.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Talk a little bit about lifestyle medicine.
So lifestyle medicine is the idea that our first line of not only treatment, but wellness and also prevention should be our lifestyle factors.
Wow, the
Right?
first line. I
First
like
line.
that. I like that. Now that kind of is a good little segue into our topic today, which is on mental health.
Yeah.
So when you think of mental health, what comes to mind?
Well, maybe I should say how I previously thought of mental health, right?
Yeah, let's start there.
The way I grew up thinking about it, when I went to physician assistant school, what we learned about mental health was really that there's categories of disease, right? So if I'm exhibiting certain behaviors, we could classify those into a disease, and then we label it like this is the dysfunction of mental health.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yes.
Yep. So I think that's the traditional medical model of mental health.
Yeah, focus on the dysfunction.
Right.
Okay. And how do you see it today?
Well, and you would agree that that's typically how we've thought about it?
Oh, no question. That's
Okay.
how I thought about it growing up.
Yeah.
The little bit of reading that I've done over the years has also contributed to me seeing it and viewing it that way too.
Right, right. So when I became a health coach, I went through the Mayo Clinic health coaching program, which was excellent, by the way. Highly recommend, not just because I worked there, but it really was a quality program. And one of the things that we learned about was this idea of positive psychology, which I had really kind of misunderstood because the popular media has an idea of what positive psychology is.
Yes.
And, it's like, oh, think positive, everything's coming up, sunshine and roses, right? But it's really much more, there's a lot more depth to it.
Absolutely.
Right? And so Martin Seligman,
Yes.
who is a psychologist and was the former president of the American Psychological Association, is called the father of positive psychology, but he also came up with a framework for true mental health, truly health, not just disease,
Right.
and ways to categorize and really better
Improve it,
enhance it, yeah, with specific factors that we could look for
Right.
to say, like, yes, this is a thriving, healthy person, or like maybe this person is just surviving, and here are some behaviors, here are some here's some actions that you could take to improve your mental health, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. In the psychology classes I'm taking right now, some of the people that were also really influential in positive psychology were, Carl Rogers, the great psychologist, as well as Abraham Maslow. And they talked about many of the same things. And that's where I was really first introduced to it. I didn't know that over the years, of the last 20 plus years, little by little, I started to do things that were consistent with behaviors of someone who practices positive psychology, with the way that I exercise, the way that I eat. But there's some other factors that I came late to the game on that were also important, like the importance of relationships, healthy relationships. And, there's a term what is it, PERMA?
Yes.
Okay, can you explain to our audience about PERMA and where that came from?
Yes, let's talk about PERMA.
Okay.
Kind of a terrible abbreviation, but it gets the job done. So P.
Yes.
Do you remember P?
Yes, I do. Positive emotion.
Yes.
Yes, and E stands for?
Engagement.
Yes, engagement. R is relationships.
Right.
M?
Meaning.
Yes, yes. And A?
is achievement
Yeah,
or accomplishment.
accomplishment. Yes,
Right.
accomplishment or achievement.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so again, PERMA stands for positive emotion. The E stands for engagement. The R is relationships. M is meaning, and A is for accomplishment. And it's really fascinating when you really bring all of those and work on all those in your life. So I thought I was pretty much a person who practiced positive emotion, but when I look back, not always.
Right.
I mean, maybe 50% of the time, I learned that as human beings, we're biologically kind of designed to have a negative bias. And so to be positive, you really kind of have to set yourself up for it. And so one of the ways I set myself up to be positive emotionally starts with sleep.
Right.
I mean, we were just talking about that off camera about the kind of difference, the difference in your day when you are rested and when you're not.
Right.
Can you tell the people what Jennifer is like? First of all, she's almost a 10 anyway. But what is Jennifer on like less than 6 hours of sleep?
Not great. And for me, I think the sleep is my Achilles tendon, right? So I really notice
Yes.
when I don't sleep, probably more than anything else
Right.
in my life. And so, for me, when I'm having one of those days, I tend to let people know
Right.
ahead of time.
Yes.
That, just so that they can give me some grace. I try not to use it often.
Right.
Maybe once a year or less. But
That's
just
it, just once a year or
well,
less. I like the way you roll. That's
I mean,
good.
not that I have worse sleep on other days, but when I really feel like, oh, I just can't get my head
Right.
above water today.
Exactly.
Because of that, I will just let people know so that they can give me a little space, maybe give me a little benefit of the doubt, and also just not take anything I say too much to heart if I come across as grumpy.
Right, exactly. And the sleep is a big factor for me. From a mental health standpoint, if I get my sleep, my thinking is clear. I'm able to better focus. But emotionally, I am up. I'm more optimistic. I feel more resilient. Practicing kindness becomes a lot easier. I'm not short with people, and I'm extending them a lot of grace and space to show up however they choose to show up that day. And when it comes to engagement, which is the E in PERMA, that one has been something that I have really become better at over the years. I mean, people are sometimes surprised to learn that if I had to choose between more of an extrovert or introvert, I'm more of an introvert. I really like my alone time, but I also like being around people and understand how important it is. I grow more when I'm around others, and I benefit from a diversity of ideas, diversity of cultures, and things like that. How are you with engagement?
Yeah, I'm the same as you. And I also think that engagement can encompass really engaging your core skills too, right?
Yes.
So engaging with other people,
Yes.
definitely, and engaging in ideas and
Right.
thoughtful discussions, but also like making sure that we find some kind of work, and it doesn't have to be paid work,
Right,
right?
yes.
Sometimes the paid work is what can be the fuel or can enable us to do the work, maybe the volunteer work,
Right, exactly.
perhaps. And I think in a way, sometimes some of us do volunteer work that maybe is our true engagement. We're in our flow state when we're volunteering, right? And maybe you're doing a job that it's good for your skills, but it's maybe not where you're at your like flow state, right? Or
Yes.
it's at your best. But if you can look at it as a way to enable you to get to do this thing that you're in your flow state, maybe you can show up for that work better.
Yeah, and be more grateful for it.
More grateful.
Yes, and let your behavior at work demonstrate how grateful you are.
Right.
That it affords you the opportunity to do the work that you really love
Right.
and that gets you into flow.
Right.
Man, great point. You're dropping knowledge.
As are you, always.
Oh, thank you. And relationships, I've said this on previous podcasts that there are relationships over the years that I've been really good at nurturing, and there are other relationships where I've dropped the ball on. And most of those have been personal relationships in which I was dating someone and I wasn't my best. A lot of the behavior was unconscious, which is no excuse for poor behavior. But now I'm smarter now. I'm more aware and understand the cost of not being someone who really demonstrates how much they value relationships by their behavior. And so my behavior it's pretty solid now. So it's pretty solid. So relationships are super important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the years and done a lot of reading from research studies that talks about that the people that are most fulfilled in life are the ones that have great community, great social networks that are positive, that are healthy, that are absent of gossip and judgment.
Yes.
And those just kind of thrive,
Yes.
And so I'm really valuing relationships more and more, and I know that they're important, especially as the older you get.
Yes.
Yes.
And speaking of getting older, I think the intergenerational relationships have become more important to me too,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
There's a nurse I work with who is amazing. She's 85, and she is just
Is she great?
she's great. She is such an inspiration to everyone around her. She does squats between
Nice.
patients.
You know how I feel about squats.
I know.
I love my squats. That's
So
awesome.
does she. I mean, she's just on every level, just showing up at like 10 every day,
We
right?
may have to have her on the show.
Yeah, you might. Nurse Donna, Keith's gonna be calling you.
No doubt. Man,
Yeah.
she's great, huh?
So great, but that relationship with her has been so special to me too, because she'll say like, I know, Jen, I know at 45 years old, like this is the thing that really like feels like, it is your all day, every day. But she's like, but wait 10 years, wait 20 years, wait 40 years, right?
Right.
Things will change. And the same with my young friends. And I know that you do a lot of coaching and mentoring in our Mayo Med School.
Yes.
And so you're around the millennials,
I am.
those young brains. And for me, it's just wonderful to
It's
be
so
around
great.
the babies,
It's so
right?
great.
Sorry,
Yeah.
babies, you're not babies.
Yeah, the younger generation.
The younger
And
generation, they're so full of enthusiasm and great
They are.
ideas. And
what's interesting about that is whenever I talk to some of the senior colleagues over at Mayo Clinic, who, when I say senior, they're older than I am. When I talk to them about like, hey, listen, there's some concern about the younger generation and whether they are entitled or whether they don't quite have the resiliency to work through some difficult and challenging situations, and they're like, oh, that hasn't been my experience. Like they are incredibly encouraged by the younger generation that is coming up through the ranks, and that brings me, great comfort. And I've had great experiences with the young people that I've had an opportunity to mentor, as well as they've mentored me.
Yes.
They've taught me things.
Yes,
and so I'm
me
super,
too.
super grateful for that.
Yeah.
And then if we move on to meaning, I feel like I've had just a meaningful life at every stage. Even the things in my past that I identified with that were, I would say, hurtful, at least hurtful to my ego, growing up the way I did in my childhood with my stepfather, who I mentioned before, struggled with alcoholism, and so it was a very abusive home environment. But I can reflect back on that, and I learned so much from that, And what I learned from that is that judging his behavior and making the error of confusing his behavior with who he is
Right.
only hurt me, and it imprisoned me with how I saw people like him, as well as it imprisoned him. Like he wasn't able to reinvent himself. And so I learned that lesson along the way. So just finding meaning in everything. And my gratitude practice is obviously a really great thing that I do every day. That also helps me continue to be mindful of what is good about my life and the meaning in the work that I do. Not as something that is an ego stroke, but more so something that is of service to
Right.
others. And what about meaning for you?
Completely the same. And I think you brought up a great point. And I've thought about this a lot since I met you and you told me about your growing up and your stepdad. And I think it shows such strength of character and maturity, emotional maturity, that you were able to reframe that,
thank you.
And I think that that's a key skill that we can learn.
Right.
Right? It's a key mental, true health
Yes.
skill, right? You can take something that could really derail a person,
Right.
And you can reframe it, which is a skill we can all learn, right? What did I learn from it?
Yes.
How did I become stronger from it?
Yes.
How do I take this forward into the world and maybe even help other people who are in that place or on either side? They could be young yous or they could be a young version of your stepfather. How do we hold space for those people? whatever their experience, right?
Absolutely. No, thank you, first of all, for the acknowledgement. And, it's 20 plus years of suffering with, before I was able to reframe it. But I think reframing, like you said, is a skill, and that it is something that is consistent with people who practice positive psychology
Yeah.
and who have lives that are relatively peaceful,
Right.
and loving. So, and then the last one is accomplishment.
Right.
How do you define accomplishment in your life?
Yeah, so, I think when I was younger, it was, I had these ideas that it had to be a certain degree or a certain job, that was accomplishment. But I think as I've gotten older, it's become more important to me to see accomplishment in different ways,
Yes.
right? So like for me, I want to show up in the world as someone who is loving and kind. And at the end of the day, if I can say like, I am proud of how I showed up,
Yes.
proud of how I handled this situation. Maybe it was easy, maybe it was hard,
Right.
but if I gave it my best, am I
Yes.
being my best self?
Yes, yes.
Learn that from Keith. That makes me feel a sense of accomplishment in a different way that getting a degree
Right.
does,
Yeah, I'm the exact same way, from a personal standpoint, in our society here in the Western culture, I used to define accomplishment the same kind of way, with whatever, it had to be a certain outcome for me to feel that there was a level of achievement that was satisfactory. Now, the way that I define the accomplishment, still in terms of setting a goal, is more based on my effort. And so the outcome is almost unimportant to me. Did I put forth my best effort?
Right.
And what's even more important to me is what you said. It's like, how am I showing up as a human being? Am I being kind? Am I being loving? Am I giving people space to show up wherever they are on their journey without judgment?
Right.
And that really is how I define it now.
Yeah.
And man, life is so much more meaningful to me now and
Yes.
fulfilling, that I define it this way as opposed to the way I used to define it. And maybe some of that comes with, I used to think like things like that would come with age, but I know a lot of folks who are a lot older and they still define it the same way. And that's cool. I'm not judging them. I just see the suffering.
Right.
I see the suffering.
Right.
And there's an easier way.
Yeah.
So have you had any personal experience with regarding mental health?
Yes, both health and disease.
Yes. So let's talk. We talked a lot about the health part of it. Are you okay sharing a little bit about the disease part of it?
Sure. Yeah, so I think, and I think it's important to realize too that sometimes when we experience anxiety, depression, we immediately start to label these things as anxiety or depression, but they're often a very normal reaction to what we perceive as a stressful situation. Right?
I agree.
So I don't think we should necessarily try to sweep it under the rug or pretend it's not happening, but instead I think it's healthier to look at, right in the eye and say, why am I feeling this sense of doom or anxiety, whatever it is, and then look at the situation. Is it real? Is this really the way I want to react to it? And if I still can't get my head around it, which has happened to me a couple times, I have gone to a therapist and said, I need a Sherpa to help walk me through this process, right? And inevitably, when I've gone, the first thing they've always said is, how's your self-care, right?
That's the first thing they ask
First thing they ask me.
I like that.
I know, because they're focused on the health, right?
You're going to the right therapist.
I know, I lucked out. So what are you doing for self-care, right? And that's often, like when I start to get really stressed about something and the wheels are turning, that's often the first thing I throw away, right? So you and I have talked about rituals.
Yes.
How we usually do those every morning and that sets the tone for the day. But for me, when I get stressed out, those are often the first things I throw away. So that was a good, valuable lesson.
Yes, it is.
So when I start to feel stressed, the first thing I need to do is double down on the self-care. Right? Not throw it away.
No. But that's often what people do.
Right.
Is they throw away the self-care.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, when I look back on, I've had some events in my life to where I definitely didn't practice. My self-care game was it was small. It was relegated toward just fitness. And at the time I didn't know, well, I guess I can't say I didn't know. I did know that there were other options, but I didn't really seriously entertain going to see a health coach or going to see a therapist. One, it would really help me. You know, I've gone to see therapists before that listened, but I'm the kind of person that I need more than just you listening. I need an action plan, a healthy action plan.
Right, me too.
And you're the same way?
Definitely.
And so when I went through a serious episode of depression, probably about 2003, and it was crippling for me at the time. And it was my perception, just like you said. And so the stock market had just corrected in 2003. I'll never forget the time. There was a ruling that came down regarding Microsoft, and it had a domino effect on the stock market. And this is the time in my life where I was a financial planner, and I was living my day and night based on what the market did. So that's a red flag right there, to hinge your emotional state on something that you cannot control. And so I did not understand that lesson back then, but it didn't take long to get that lesson, and I started to begin to change that. But I saw my income change from being what I thought was high to being cut in half. And here I am, you know, leveraged with a pretty high mortgage, a car that I was leasing, and other expenses that I was living. When I was making a lot of money, I think this is no problem. But when the income is, you know, cut in half, it's a bit of a challenge, at least for the ego. It could have, the way I see it now is that was an opening.
Right.
Back then, it was doom and gloom.
Exactly.
And so instead of sharing with anyone else, again, here's the power and the importance of relationships. Instead of sharing with other people, I hunkered down, isolated myself, crawled out of the house to do appointments and go to the gym. Other than that, this is my day. A little bit of food. And when I feel depressed, I don't like to eat. So when I say a little bit of food, it was just a little bit of food.
Same.
You the same way, you don't want to eat?
Totally.
I do not want to eat. And then the next thing I did was I crawled up on the couch, and it was a steady 12-hour dose of Law and Order and the History Channel. That was it. That was my vices.
That'll bring you up.
I know, right? That'll lift me right up.
Yeah.
See people get locked up, and then just watching history.
World War II over and over.
Over and over again. I know, right?
Great.
You don't recommend it?
Well,
depending on what I want, right?
not unless it brings you positive emotion.
and it doesn't. So I lived this way for about a good 6 or 7 months like this, and eventually I came out of it, but there was a ton of suffering along the way. And fast forward along the years, I've had other challenges that on paper could have been just as daunting. The difference was my positive psychology game was stronger.
Nice.
And I started to share with people what I was going through. And I think part of the reason that I didn't share what I was going through is because I felt some shame. I felt that I'd be judged. And it was the exact opposite when people did find out. They were like incredibly supportive.
Right.
Yeah, incredibly supportive. And that's not to say that everybody will be, but you'll be able to navigate and find those who will be supportive. And I'm not looking for agreement.
Right.
I'm just looking for people to say, hey, listen, you know what? There was some mistakes made here. Now's not the time to talk about those.
Right.
We'll resolve the issue.
Right.
And then we'll come back and visit this when we're in a better place, when we're on solid ground.
Right.
That's a way to provide space and grace.
Yes.
As well as to come back and resolve, put together a plan moving forward so that we're not in this position again, without making me feel any more shame than I already do, or projecting blame.
Right.
And so I've got friends who do that for me left and right.
Awesome.
So yeah, so that's a personal experience of how I had an experience with depression. And one of the benefits of having experienced that is I have incredibly grown my compassion and my empathy for people who have some kind of mental episode that they're experiencing.
Right.
Yeah. What about you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Same. And if I can also go back to where you were saying about sharing with friends, I think that is wonderful because, just having people around you who know what you're going through, again, they're going to extend that space and grace for you. And sometimes they can offer you a fresh perspective, and then you're increasing your relationships, the R and karma, which is great. But I also think that I would say too that sometimes having a therapist who doesn't know you and can just look at you from a totally fresh perspective can be really helpful too. And so I would also encourage people, I mean, I'm a huge fan of therapy.
Yes.
So, and not that you have to stay in it forever. Sometimes you can go and you can get through a major issue in like 3 or 4 visits. It's not like you have to sign up for this for years and years, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, I had a close friend who went through a divorce. It was extremely painful for him. And we talked on the phone every day for like a year and a half, but he was seeing a therapist, and she recommended a great book. I mean, so if anyone out there is going through some kind of relationship change and it's painful, the book Spiritual Divorce by Debbie Ford is excellent.
Yeah.
And when I went through a breakup 4.5 years ago, I read the same book, and at the time when he was reading it, he said, "Hey, you might want to read this book." I was like, "I'm good." Fast forward, I'm in those shoes. I'm like, "What's the name of that book?" And it was really, really powerful, and it helped me see my way forward in a very positive way. But I totally agree that a therapist can be very helpful because there's still some things that you may not feel comfortable sharing with someone who knows you closely,
Right.
that you're not proud of, even
Right.
though you know they won't judge you.
Right.
But having that other third party there that is objective and going to hold the space
Right.
still, because not every therapist, they could be objective,
Right.
but they may not hold the space really well.
Right.
And but you know, finding who that is can be really, really helpful.
Right.
So anything you want to say in closing regarding mental health?
I don't think so. I think
Okay,
we covered it.
I can ask one question.
Sure.
What do you think as a society that we can do regarding mental health to make to create more space and grace, you know, regarding the subject?
That is a great question, Keith Jones. You know, I think sharing our own experiences, like I like to tell people that I went to therapy because I think people then could feel more comfortable either looking at that for themselves or maybe they know someone who's going through something and they would
Right.
feel like it's okay to suggest that, right? I do have kind of a funny story for you
Yeah, hit me with it.
about making it more maybe acceptable, right?
Yes.
So my parents have been married for 51 years. When you meet them,
I've been asking you to meet them
I
for
know,
a while now.
I know.
So I
You
heard how
will.
great they are.
They're amazing. And my friends who meet them, especially my married friends, are always like, "Oh my gosh, I want to be just like your parents," right? Because they're totally in tune with each other. They're really amazing, and I am honored to get to be their daughter. They're great role models. They're great friends of mine now. They have to
Awesome.
parent me less, which is nice. We can just be
Be
buddies.
friends.
Yeah. But you know, something that people don't know about them is that they went through marriage therapy when they first got married, you know, and they named, my middle name is after their marriage therapist.
Wow.
And when they told me that as a kid, I was like, oh my gosh,
Right,
it's so embarrassing.
right.
Like I have to carry this around the rest of my life that you two went to therapy? Like,
Yes.
I was like, can I change it? Like,
Right.
how do I go about changing my name? I was so ashamed.
Oh, wow.
It really, and I would like never told anyone for years, ever, because I just thought it was so horrible. And then I realized that this is actually a gift.
That's a gift.
Right?
This person.
Right? This person was a gift, right?
Right, because
And
she
then-
positively impacted, or he or she positively impacted them, and then you
Right.
grew up in the home that you grew up in.
Right.
Otherwise, it may not have been that environment.
Right, or it might not have happened, right?
Exactly,
Right.
yeah.
And so now, and especially now, when I have friends who look at my parents and they just say, oh my gosh, they've had such an easy time. They just, you can tell they're just best friends and they're, you know, never have
the
any
story.
problems, right? And I say, it wasn't always like that, you
Right.
know? Like they've done the work.
Right, they're working on it.
They're still working on it,
Yeah.
you know? But they really did put in that work early on. And
God, I love that.
you know, and I think, again, just talking about these experiences, and now I tell people pretty early on when they meet me, like, oh, my middle name is after my parents' marriage therapist, and they're always like, what?
Yeah.
But, you know, I like
Yeah.
to share that now,
Exactly.
just to normalize this experience that even really healthy people, really functional, vibrant people have.
Yeah, and I think if we looked at it, like when you think about a coach, most people think now outside of the dynamic of sports, when you hear whether it's a wellness coach or whether it's a financial coach, people probably initially thought about anything outside of sports as it being a negative, like, oh,
Right.
you can't manage that yourself. But I think we've realized our limitations,
Right.
and we can't do everything
Right.
with perfection. We can do, we can do things the best we can,
Right.
and having that additional support man, that's a smart move.
Right?
You know, it's a very
Yeah.
smart move. And I think, unfortunately, with some of the things that happen in the media, that anytime there is some kind of tragedy, we further stigmatize
Right.
mental health or mental illness
Right.
by saying that this is the reason that this person, you know, did this this deplorable act.
Right.
But that just makes people less inclined to share. You
Absolutely.
know, if there's a different way that we can describe the event or something that happened, or just started with a preface like, hey, listen, we all struggle for, you know, with mental illness or mental health at some point in our lives, and some people more acutely than others. And one thing we need to do is to make sure that we provide the right kind of support for ourselves,
Right.
for our family and friends, for a greater society, so that we minimize the chances of something like this happening, you know, before. It's a failure of society.
Right.
And I think we can start the conversation like that. And here are some things that you can do
Right.
on your own, and we encourage you to talk and share your own experience with other people, and this can help us resolve, you know, this deficit regarding this part of our well-being,
Absolutely.
and then make it more about health. So,
Yeah.
well, Jennifer, thanks for sharing about your parents. Thank you for the bright lights you always bring.
Same with you.
Thank you. I'm always better for it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Same here.